Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Thriller Podcast. How you doing today, Mike?
Good. I'm excited to discuss a book that we will get to talk about with our patrons in just about a week here, Chris. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're finally back on the Thriller podcast thread. Haven't been on here in a minute. What was the last thing we recorded on this one? Forgotten War, I guess, when we were
Don
rushing
Bentley.
through finishing all the Don Bentley books.
Yeah.
Yeah, back in February. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you've been wondering where we are, we should use it right now to plug our other podcast, the Scott Harvath podcast. We've been ripping through we did 3 books straight on that one. And the novellas and the little mini side quests that all came around hidden order. I don't know if I recommend that one. But anyways, go check those out.
We wrapped up with Code of Conduct, and that was a awesome book. Top 5 in the series for sure.
Great book. But today, we're talking about Daniel Silva, someone that we've been wanting to cover for a while. And I know we should just right off the gates. Right off the bat. That's what I was trying to say. Sherry has been begging us to do some Daniel Silva. I don't know if this is her first love or she just, is very passionate about the series, but and we, I guess, again, another plug. If you want to become a patron, you can join our very vibrant group me chat. All of our patrons in the community, as well as we've been doing these quarterly book clubs where all of us suggest a book and then we vote on it. The first 2 were my suggestions. Didn't go 3 for 3. Instead, Sherry's book got selected this time. Great. Yes. I'm so happy. We got to read this. I'm excited to cover the first half today.
Big time. We always have fun when it's a brand new series, the first book in a series. Now, I don't believe this is Daniel Silva's first book. I think it's his first one that got big, like real mainstream. And it's definitely the first Gabriel Allon book.
And that's what I meant. Gabriel Allon book.
Yeah, first Gabriel Allon book. And that's, 2001. So it's over 20 years old now. And we always have fun with debuts, seeing where an author started, the first glimpse we get of a character. And he's not a young character, Gabriel Allon. So I think I would want to read more in this series, see if we ever get a prequel. We have some really good flashbacks about not quite his origin so much, but at least I think about 9 years earlier in his life, the turning point, which caused him to get out of the game. But man, like you said, right off the jump, I want to know more about this character. He's intriguing. He's badass. He's low key. This whole metaphor of him being the art restorer, I think is really powerful in a lot of ways, and we're going to get into that. And maybe even equally as enticing as getting a new character is getting the old spy master. Ari Shamron is, if he's not the winner of this book for both of us, he's going to have to be the winner for one of us. He's awesome. The old-time spy master, sometimes in these series, is make or break. If that's a great character, you're going to love the main character. If the old-timey spy master gets you bought into the history of why our characters are where they are in life due to this person's background, you love it all the more. So I think we got 2 amazing characters, very intriguing. Within the first couple of chapters, you really are bought into these people. And it's almost like they're legends. I read half a book. We're only doing part 1 here today, up to approximately, I think, chapter 26, 25, 26, somewhere in that range. And I already know in the first half of the book, these are 2 legends, titans of the thriller universe.
Yes. No, very true. And I don't know if it was like the whole George Guidell, because I did the audiobook like I normally do. I don't know if it was the whole George Guidell at all.
He was amazing. Amazing.
And this is now 2001 George Guidell. He's in his prime. Where it brought me back to Transfer of Power. Like it just had that. Like I know it's completely vibe. It didn't read like a
Vince Flynn,
a Vince Flynn and Mitra book, but just like.
But he's younger.
Being in
George
that place,
is younger.
Yeah, and it even brought me back to like Lions of Lucerne.
I agree.
that whole feeling. I don't know. Maybe it's purely because of George Guidell, and he's putting me in that mindset. He does a great job of taking me around Paris, and we're in Amsterdam and Cornwall. were all over the place. In Montreal, like that was, we've never really been in Canada before, at least on this podcast. And, you know, loved being immersed in these places. And I think, you know, George helps with that.
I was just going to say, and add to that a layer of English spy novel, you know, throw in a little Le Carré there, you know, and,
right.
And it's just like, it blends perfectly. And then the Israeli stuff, because George is doing the accents of these Israelis who are also living in England, Cornwall, and he's got to get the British. And then an American character comes in, the audio technician who helps him spy on the apartment. And that audio technician is American. He kind of gets contracted by the CIA. And that was the only time I felt out of the universe, because George's American voice was so Scott Coleman. The second he opened his mouth as American dude, I'm like, that's Scott Coleman right there. It just for some reason made me think of him. But besides that, all these characters are really unique in how George is playing them and creating their voice. I agree completely. And that's a wide range you have to have. The Israeli, but English speaking, you know, throw in some Hebrew words. It's impressive.
And to me, I mean, I know this is a Gabriel Allon story, and it's, you know, sort of giving us, peeling back like his beginnings, and we get this connection with Shamran. But I felt that almost like Jacqueline was a major, like one of the main characters. Like, I know she was one of the main characters, but to me, we were with her so much that it felt like Gabriel Allon was taking like a back seat for like half the novel. And I loved it. Did you feel the same way or no?
Yeah, like I said, I'm only on the first half, so she wasn't around in the beginning chapters. You know, the cut back to Vienna, we see his family and how they're blown up. Yeah. So I'm waiting for this next female character who will step in. And for a while, I thought it was that Emily Parker, I think her name was, but she's dispatched on the bridge, the hit in Paris on the Israeli ambassador. So I'm like, okay, she's not the woman that Gabriel's going to have to get involved with. And then so when Jacqueline or Sarah Halavi, her French Jewish name,
what's her,
and then her modeling name,
her modeling name
or something,
Dominique. Yeah.
She's got all these different names. When she's brought in, I'm like, whoa, this is also a great character. Yeah, we do see a lot of her for a little while.
Reminds me of Donatella. Like,
yeah, definitely Donatella.
Not as sassy, but like, you know, like that.
Sure.
Obviously Israeli fashion, you know, Akidon, like that kind of, you know.
Definitely. But I like how they come together. I like how her and Gabriel intertwine. And you know what? Another powerful thing I'm seeing from Daniel Silva that is hard to pull off and maybe not done as often as we'd like is we're getting the backstory of why Gabriel is out of the game, why he's hiding out in Cornwall, why he's this art restorer. But it's not being just told to us. It's slowly being developed, and how the flashback in Vienna is such a major turning point, but we don't know exactly what went wrong. Right. And slowly Dominique / Jacqueline is brought into the picture, filling us in the audience about how she was involved in that kind of tangentially, and why she might be to blame, and why Gabriel feels he's to blame. And so basically they had an affair on an op while they were supposed to be undercover as husband and wife. He resisted her advances very strongly, but eventually it happened. And Gabriel felt compelled to tell his wife about it. And he did. And that's why she tagged along on the Vienna op, because they were going through some marital struggles. And it was in Vienna that Tariq, the terrorist, was able to get her and the child, the young child. So the way that is filling in the reader's knowledge, at the same time Jacqueline is a new character, it gives us reason to buy into her because she's so intimately linked to him and the events of the prologue and his past. And I love how that's woven together, instead of just giving us the backstory of a character because it's cool and awesome, but it doesn't really relate to the plot that's currently developing. These ones relate perfectly. Same with Ari Shamron. We hear a little bit of his background, how he recruited Allon and he recruited Jacqueline, and everything we hear in his background is he's like a myth. He's a legend. He wears that bomber jacket, and we're seeing,
ripped,
and we're seeing that all his people around him will basically die for him and give their life.
What's
for
the
him.
Myth that like someone stabbed him or something, but in actuality he just like got it hung on on something, right?
Yeah, he just got it ripped on something. Yet this myth spread, quickly, and he did nothing to stop it. But it creates this aura about him that intimately ties. It's almost like a love triangle here, or a professional triangle of assassins from Shamron, the old spy master, to Gabriel Allon, the middle-aged, still good looking, still top of his game, but definitely aging out a little bit, going through some stuff. And then this woman, this model, Israeli spy. All of this links together perfectly, and it's not all revealed in one chapter or two chapters. It took all 25 chapters to develop their connections, and I like that.
Yeah, and we're in like a strange place, right? They never call it the Mossad. Like they always say the word. I don't think the word Mossad like is in this book at all.
No, it's not used.
The agency is in a strange place. Like Sean's been brought back, and there's definitely some weird interpolitic dynamics between him and maybe some of his underlings, and he needs him and Allon go way back. There's we get these intercut scenes with like them going back to the Black September, the revenge on the Munich. Black September attacks. Yeah,
exactly.
I liked how the flashback scenes were kind of just like thrown in. Like it wasn't like a chapter. It was like you would go through a scene and then immediately cut to something that was a flashback, but it had an importance or direct relation to what we just read.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
He perfectly intertwines these flashbacks to build these characters instead of just giving us exposition. Although we do get some exposition, especially like, with this character that Jacqueline has to, what's his name?
Yusuf, that she has to seduce.
That she has to seduce. So, there's a lot going on, and I feel like Silva's writing is very good, and like, and it's also just this idea of this art restorer who is this master assassin, and he gets the sense that he always has to fix things. Like he's put on this earth for a reason, and like that is to restore these fine things. And it's not just the art, but it's also like he has this heavy burden of restoring, the Jewish homeland. Like it's this weird, I don't know. It's a completely different type of killer operator than we've ever read before.
Yep. Completely agree. And I love that wrinkle, and I love how it's explained. And we're dropped into almost the middle of his life and his career. It's like I didn't want Mitch Rapp to start with the American assassin, see him being recruited, him being trained at the farm. We needed the transfer of power Mitch right out the gates, where he's, playing this beggar on the streets of Iran undercover. We're getting that with Allon. He's kind of out of the game. He had this major life event, which is only alluded to in a prologue. And we have to put in the work as the reader and engage with the text in order to fill in the gaps and see how he got where he is. And the art restoration is just a beautiful metaphor that's not too in your face. Like there's one scene in Cornwall where Peel, which we have to talk about, great character, the little boy Peel, sneaks into his apartment and sees all these tools and this magnifying glass and these chemicals, and there's this smell. And he doesn't quite get what's going on. And that's where we as the reader are at with the stranger, the strange man. Is this person Gabriel Allon? It's hinted that he is. If he is, what's he doing? And what are these tools for? Or were we led to believe maybe this is the bomb maker? This is some terrorist hiding out? Is this a cell? And it's slowly revealed to us that this metaphor of the restoration is about his own personal life as well, and his country. And man, that metaphor is explained perfectly without being too on the nose about it. And here's what Daniel Silva writes. One by one, he had closed the doors and barred the windows that had once given him access to life's pleasures. He drifted through time and space the way he imagined a damned spirit might visit the place where he had lived. Able to see loved ones and possessions, but unable to communicate or taste or touch or feel. He experienced beauty only in art, and only by repairing damage inflicted by uncaring owners and by the corrosive passage of time. Shamron had made him the destroyer. Gabriel had turned himself back into the healer. Unfortunately, he was not capable of healing himself. As always, he was struck by the similarities between the craft of restoration and the craft of killing. The methodology was precisely the same. study the target, become like him, do the job, slip away without a trace.
Yeah, that's great. That's a quote I had in mind when I brought that up. It's very intriguing, this idea of, like I said, crafting the killer and this art restorer together. It's like a perfect meshing of these two. But I feel like the cheap way of doing this he would be an art restorer like by day and then a killer by night. But like
Exactly.
this is just who he is, you know.
And the first time we see him, he's kind of climbing down from the scaffold in Vienna in this old cathedral. I think it's like this Swedish or German girl is kind of flirting with him and sees him working on this painting, thinks it's kind of romantic. He says, this is a church. It's not a brothel or something like that, or it's not a nightclub or something like that. He's very sassy to her. And so he doesn't open up just shooting dudes and, beheading somebody or being Superman on an op. He's literally just climbing down from a scaffold, wrapping up his art supplies and brushing off the advances of some random girl and going off into the night in the Vienna darkness. I'm like, that's a cool way to meet a character, which subverts your expectations for a thriller of they have to be this big, strong badass. And what it eventually allows us to do is realize what's holding him back has nothing to do with his skills, nothing to do with his talents. It has to do with him forgiving himself. And the characters that come into his life, the women, Barry Shamron, his former mentor, they're all going to have to come into the life and kind of peel that back. Like an art restorer has to painstakingly, know what chemicals to use and how to mix it. It's going to be a very delicate process to get Allon back into the game, to convince him to come do a mission, work for the Israelis, protect the homeland, and 2, to forgive himself enough where he maybe can move on. So halfway through the book, I'm thinking, is Jacqueline here for the long haul? She's someone who's trained. She knows how the game is played. She'd be able to respect boundaries. And she's learning her role in the death of his wife and child, while not a direct role. The fact that she had the affair with him and loved him and wanted to sleep with him so badly ultimately is why his family was compromised. She's going to have to grapple with that as well. So is she around in the long term? And if she is, I'm very happy with that. Or is something going to happen by the end of this book that I frankly just don't know? And people who read the whole series are like, man, that must be so exciting to not know and be back in those early days. And I'm on board for the ride. I am excited about that.
Yeah, it's also interesting to see, like, all right, what are we going to get in the next books? Like, is, like you said, is Jacqueline around for the long run? Is this our team? Is it a Gabriel, Allon, and Shamron? Is it going to be like that's the Irene Mitch comp?
Yeah,
with Jacqueline being like the Scott role, I guess, or the I don't know, any sort of helper, I guess. Yeah. The other question is, you have it here in your notes, is like all these little like Jewish helpers that Shamron has piled over time. So we get like this, this drunk art gallery salesman in Isherwood. He's an interesting character.
Yeah, he's funny. The
he's
banker.
Going through,
there's another banker.
Oh yeah, there's like this Stone guy who gives him money, who owns like essentially like the Donald Trump of England. Like,
yeah, the media mogul.
Right. So I guess by meeting these characters and seeing them interplay, you see how, along with Allon and Jacqueline, you see how good of a asset builder Shamron is. Like it's just, he's has this very well connected network of Jews, and plays them, uses them, instills vigor in them. Like the whole reason why Jacqueline even signs up to do this is because she's just a model, but she wants to have something more in life. Like, and then he goes to Allon and sort of dangles this Tariq character. Like, oh, you remember the guy who killed your wife? He's back and he's coming for you, but
he doesn't lead with that.
No, he doesn't.
He walks him into it. I love that. It's so smart.
That, I love the Cornwall stuff.
Yes,
like
same.
Him interacting with this Peel character who's kind of this, poor little boy who has, shitty parents, don't really care about him. This guy just is very inquisitive. He's not like a rude boy, but he's like just inquisitive. Obviously, he has some skills because Allon hires him to be like his watcher, sort of takes him under his wing a little bit.
Yeah.
And is super crestfallen when when the stranger leaves, decides to take up on this mission. Be interesting. Like, is Peel going to be a character that we continue on in other books?
Yeah.
Does he come back?
Yeah, I was a little sad hitting like 15, 20 chapters in, and Peel hasn't come back, and the Cornwall stuff felt like ancient history so far in the past. I was like, Gabriel's really in the game right now. What was with the whole Peel business? And right at that moment, Ari Shamron, in a conversation with him, says, I never put you as a man to break a little boy's heart or to abandon a little boy and hurt him. And then the chapter just ends with Allon going, Peel. And I'm like, okay, so there's a thread that's still dangling that's supposed to feel a little forlorn or not closed, and this hint of sadness. And that's like what Cornwall is, like I just think of hard times and this marina sailing culture with the rough waters and the dark skies and the clouds and the rain. And I just felt emotionally and physically I was there. And when we didn't have it, you kind of have this sense of this bittersweet, you kind of miss it. And I feel like a lot of people with roots to their homeland, that's how they feel. And Peel is kind of this anchor which wants to keep bringing you back there. And knowing Allon lost his child and the way he bonded with that boy so quickly, I'm like, it's a very, very warm kind of storyline. It reminds me of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. The main character, and he's the teacher, and he's at the school, and he's kind of living in his trailer, and he also hires one of the schoolboys who's kind of this oddball, kind of this odd lot kid, and he lets him be his watcher and hang out at his trailer, and he's kind of like, if none of the other boys are going to be his friend, he's like, I'll be your rock, and I kind of sense that with Allon and Peel, and the way George Goodell also reads the kid when he says, "I'm Peel," like it's heartwarming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder where it's going. I don't know if it's going anywhere, but I sincerely want it to.
I feel that like Cornwall is going to be like our Bishop's Gate, like it's going to be our base of operations in books going forward. Like he's set up shop there. That's where he does most of his art restoration. I could see that being, I could see Peel coming back, which is, the fact that that's where he wants to live. Unless, I have no idea. Don't know what's going to happen. So, but
yeah, I could see it, and I would want that. That would be kind of cool. Another wrinkle here, you said, with like Isherwood and all these helpers, this network that Shamron has created. We don't really have a B plot so much, but there's a lot of complexity going on behind the scenes. I like how the main storyline is either Yusuf meeting with his handler, Kemal, which is kind of neat how those two are kind of going around Europe, popping up different disguises with him.
You mean Tariq?
Tariq, yeah, Tariq, sorry. So you have like the main villain plot line and his handler. And then you have Yusuf and the girl, which is very clearly connected to the Gabriel Allon stuff. So that's all one storyline. It's really just these two storylines. But then there's a lot of these C plots, if you will, that give it color and vibrancy. For like Isherwood, he's almost being bought out, and he's got to kind of deny the advances of this guy who wants to buy his failing art supply or art trading business. And it's like he has to deny that because Shamron has a mission for him, and like if he sells out, they lose all that cover and the mission is busted. So we're relying on this whimsical, down on his luck, probably a drunk Isherwood, and we're also relying on the banker. And the banker's like, I've already given you millions, Ari. Why? I'm not going to do another favor for you. And he's like, give me a storyline that can get, my newspapers the front lead. You never give me anything. So like in the background, like you said, Shamron is pulling all these strings, doing all these things, yet they're not enough to distract from the main plot. We know they're important. They're building texture and complexity of this network. And they're building, I think, the buy-in of why this op is funded and why Shamron can do this off the books without the prime minister knowing. Like the prime minister is not on our team, is what we're hearing. The Israeli prime minister, I think Lev was his name.
No, Lev is his director of operations that he's doing.
His boss
doing this. Yeah, no, it's his. He's the boss. Sharon's the boss. And then Lev, I didn't get this at first, but then like I figured it out. I went back and like reread. Like Lev he got brought back. Like Lev thought he was going to get the top job when the prime minister fired him, but Shimron got it. And Lev is like sort of this character waiting in the wings who obviously wants Shimron to fail because he wants that top job.
Yeah. So he's got to hide it from both the top brass above him and guys like
the people below him.
The people below him. And the fact that he has these years and decades of connections that he can pull on, I think really is great and doesn't distract us from the op. So I think it's handled very well.
Yeah, no, very much so agree. You mentioned this, like every time we see Tariq meeting up with like his sort of handler, again, like what was that guy's name? Kamal, yeah. His backstory, like in terms of like how he's like this essentially like a sleeper agent, like working for the PLO, with that was a very interesting story. But yeah, like every time he meets them, he does like the first time he meets him is on the train.
He's got the blonde hair.
He's like this blonde hair American and thinks and then he speaks Arabic. And then the second time is in Portugal when he just like is this pretending to be a dock worker speaking Portuguese to him. And then after the third time, he then surprises him by speaking Arabic. Like those are some cool scenes. And again, I felt like I was in Portugal, like listening to what is it, Fado music. And, when we're describing, being in, cause I think he has to take a train from Switzerland to Paris or to London. Just getting those scenes, like even with like we're in Paris when Tariq kills that girl and assassinates the Israeli ambassador, like just being there. Like I don't know, we're popping around Europe and
Amsterdam. We didn't even talk the boat in Amsterdam.
Oh yeah.
With Inga.
The boat. Yeah.
Yeah. That was wild.
We're going all over the place, but I don't feel like it's too much.
Me neither.
Yeah.
It's handled so well because I feel like Allon and the main plot has really only been in 2 places. Yet the villain has to be moving constantly on the move from getting caught. And there's mistakes made along the way. Like when he has to shoot the brother who owns the yacht because he just killed the daughter and overdosed the daughter. He's caught off guard when the brother comes. So he has to shoot him even though he doesn't have time to put the silencer on. And he's like, shit, now I got to get out of Amsterdam. And before that, there was another there was a meeting where Kamal sent somebody to come to him. I think like Muhammad or Mustafa or somebody. And he ended up killing that dude because he was sloppy. He went into town. He was hanging around. He's like an Arab in the middle of Greece, speaking Arabic, barely knowing any Greek. Like all it takes is one grandmother sitting somewhere in a chair watching, tips off her cousin who works for the police, who has a brother who, who's in the security services. And all of a sudden, everyone's guard is up in this little town. So he's like, that guy was sloppy. Now I'm out of here. It makes sense that he has to keep moving. And that does all the globe trotting for us, or the Europe, trotting. And the backstories we're getting about all these characters, like Fournier, Jacqueline riding her bike, up the hills of, was that the French Alps or the Swiss Alps? It's like, all of that is taking us around Europe in a believable way that doesn't require Gabriel Allon just to be in 8 cities all at once just to make it exciting.
Right. Exactly.
And I like that kind of writing.
Yeah.
We kind of hinted at it, but the whole backdrop of this book we haven't really addressed, which is the peace talks.
Yeah.
The whole idea is
it's very interesting to read this book.
Yep.
Now.
Exactly.
It's very interesting to read this book now.
Yeah. So the ambassador gets killed by Tariq, who always has to have a girl with him on these ops. It's kind of his hallmark, his calling card. And it was this American. He killed her, dumped her in the river, shot her. She goes down the river. And so that's what tips us off to that Tariq made this hit. And now Allon is tracking down somebody that Signals Intercept has connected to the waiter who tipped off Tariq, gave him the phone call at the embassy, and the Israeli ambassador, was killed. So the whole thing is, what is this strain of Palestinians doing to interrupt the peace process, not wanting this peace deal to be signed? But they're also leaving enough hints for the Israelis to know that it was them, which makes me think they're too good to do that, so they must be doing this on purpose. I think what they ultimately want is the Israelis to look like the bad guys, because they know old-timers like Ari Shamron will get Gabriel Allon into the game, and then the Israelis can be caught red-handed, caught with their pants down. And I feel like that's what will cause the peace negotiations to break down, which the Americans so desperately want and are very close to. I feel like it's going to break down because of what our heroes are doing, and they're getting played by Tariq and his people. So I feel like there's something fishy going on that we just don't know what it is yet. And ultimately, our characters, our heroes, are going to be caught up in the game and have to change course.
Yeah, that's definitely what I feel like we're going towards, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It's almost like, because the dumb thing is just to do this, like that's gonna like definitely not gonna cause you to back out. Like we know that unless this allows the Israelis to then blame, to back out of the deal because they think the Palestinians are at the table, but they're actually not. Like they're secretly funding people like Tariq. But if there are people in Washington who really want this, or wherever want this to happen, this is not the way to like under. But what I think they want to have happen is what you said is they want them to be provoked into doing essentially what they're doing to then cause the peace deal to fail. Yeah.
Exactly. Like who's playing who, and that goes to the point I'm currently at in the book, which might be the most suspenseful so far.
Oh yeah,
when Jacqueline
sorry, this book, it has that old, and like I love that you brought up Tinko Tailor Soldier Spy, or what was the other one? The spy who came in from the cold.
Right.
It's like old school spycraft. Like I really appreciate when we get some of this stuff. I don't know. Maybe it's just because this is an older book, so you have to do some of these things. But he sends her in, and she gets like the exact serial make and model of an alarm clock and of the telephone and
the keys.
And the keys, and questions are on like, all right, well, she's like, wait, I think he touches the buttons with a pen. So like we have to mark it up with a pen. He's like, what kind of pen? He's grilling her like, whereas nowadays no one has a home phone. Yeah. People don't have alarm clocks. So you would just, put in a new iPhone or I don't know, but it's just the nature of the timing makes it more suspenseful. Like just because of like how they had to do it back then,
big time. And it's also the way it's written. We're getting really great chapter stops. Like they're so suspenseful, particularly this point of the book. When she thinks he saw her he came out of the shower, and she thinks he might have seen her pressing the keys into the mold. He's like, what were you doing? She goes, I'm looking for my cigarettes. And then they fight, and she like storms out of there. It's like, oh shit, is he onto her? And then when Gabriel Allon is in the apartment and he has to reset the phone because he plugged in the new phone with the bug, and if he doesn't reset the time, he'll know somebody was in there unplugging it and messing with it. And it comes so close, he barely sneaks out, and he has to cover his head as he's walking down the staircase past them, and they're coming up. I'm just like, oh my God. And that's right where I cut off. When you end the chapter like that, I'm just thinking, Yusuf turns his head and looks at Gabriel Allon walking down the stairs. Is he going to go kill her? Like,
right.
Is he going to kill her? Does he know? Or did he anticipate that? Knows she's a spy, knows they're onto him, and he's playing them with what he says on the recording to throw them off.
Yeah.
It's spy versus spy. There's no action, yet there's total suspense.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting how, I think it's either right before this or just right after this. I'm not speaking out of turn, but Shimron's like, well, it doesn't really matter if he knows or not, because like we'll just assume that he knows, we know, and then we'll still be ahead of the game. And I'm like, all right, it's a mind fuck like of a spy game.
It is. It's awesome, and I'm really looking forward to who knows what about whom. And what's the consequences of that? Who makes their move first? Who plays their cards first? Is he going to try to recruit her?
I definitely think that's where it's going. Yeah.
I mean, it seems
why else
like
go into all of this Palestinian stuff? And you also have this in your notes. Do you think their relationship happened super quick? Like almost. I mean, I know that Yusuf, like they say that he likes to pick up girls, and he has his reputation, but I mean, maybe it's just because I haven't dated in a long time. And like, is this just
No.
like how it happens?
I almost lost it. This would have been my loser of the book, yet I suspect there's more to it. My loser would have been Jacqueline all of a sudden gets picked up instantly by this Palestinian dude, goes home with him, and can so quickly pretend in like a one-night stand she's head over heels for him that literally the next day he's pouring his heart out to her about his childhood and what the Israelis did to him. And he's sleeping with this supermodel. Like, if he has a brain at all, he would be totally confused why literally one of the hottest supermodels ever, one, is in bed with him right now, and two, isn't having some strange reaction to him after a one-night stand completely pouring his heart out about his Palestinian beliefs and his background and what the Jews did to his family. I'm like, I have no idea how things went that fast in their relationship, unless he's doing it on purpose.
Mm.
He wants to get a read from her to see if she's going to come out and have a tell that she's a spy, that she's Israeli. Is he trying to like poke the bear to then be able to manipulate her or to keep her around? Is he playing her when he's giving her all these details? Because if he's just disclosing all these details and he really thinks the supermodel just wants to know more about his personal background and philosophy after a one-night stand, come on, man. That's insane. It just seems like exposition for exposition's sake. Right. But I suspect there's more going on. I really do. I really do.
Yeah, I guess you have to like start to think about like, all right, well, if he works for Tariq, then he obviously is. So what sort of game are they running here? What are they trying to do?
If he's working for Tariq, why would he want to say all that about his beliefs and actually prove that he is pro-Palestine and Israeli hater and anti-Zionist? And
because they're planning something, like they're the next attack. Like maybe they need somebody.
Yeah, but you wouldn't give that to a person you have a one-night stand with who can go off and report that and or be freaked out by it or scared by it. And there's this whole like, I bet you never, thought an Arab would treat you this way and all that. And she has to play along and be like, oh no, of course. It's very coy. And I think there's a purpose to it. I would be dissatisfied. Yeah.
But, she has to stay there because she needs to.
Right.
So like by staying in and not being like perplexed or put aback by this, she's sort of like reconfirming to him that she actually is a spy. It's almost like she has to keep on checking herself and like reminding, all right, if I wasn't a spy, I would have no problem. I would say this, or I would have no problem sort of like questioning him because, or pushing back because, that's what normal people do, Yeah. You have to sort of toe this line of like, all right, I don't want to seem too eager, but I also have to seem like a normal person. I have to,
And he's trying to get it out of her. He's trying to see how she reacts when he goes, do you know any Arabic? And like, obviously she has to say no if she's not a spy. But then you would have some reactions to some things he's saying. Like, I thought that was a weird question of, do you know any Arabic? And his response to that was like, interesting. And then he asked her, what was the name of that nightclub? Because she told a story of like, oh, I'm interested in this because I met some Israelis at a nightclub and they were telling me their side of the story. That's the BS she's making up. And he goes, what's the name of the nightclub? And she can't answer. She stumbles. And I feel like if Yusuf is as good as a Tariq or is as good as an Ari Shamron or one of these people, that's a tell right there. When she can't say the name of the nightclub, because a good spy would completely have that cover story on lock or be able to make it up on the spot. I wonder how he reads that. It's almost like I'm doing psychology and reverse psychology to figure out these characters' motivations. And that's a lot of fun because I don't know where it goes.
The other thing that I was like stumbled upon is they talk about her as if she's like Cindy Crawford, like of France. And I don't know, like some of these top models, I don't know, maybe just, I know a couple of them, but the way they describe her, I feel like most people wouldn't know who she is.
Yeah, and there's a nod to that to kind of break that wall when Isherwood is like, oh, you're our new secretary? You could be this girl's twin, this pinup model over here. And it's like, well, that is her. So
Yeah,
there's like a nod to that kind of semblance, which kind of lowers the reader's guard, I feel like, willing to accept that. But people might notice her if she is that big, that important.
Yeah, especially if she's, because when we first meet her, she's kicking people in the balls.
I love that introduction to her.
Oh, yeah. Great introduction.
That's a great introduction to her. And it comes after, I was kind of thrown off with the French Nazi stuff. We're going to like Vichy France and the Nazi occupation.
Because that's her parents, right?
I'm like, man, that moment is like something out of, geez, any movie. Inglourious Bastards, like that opening scene in the cabin.
Yeah.
But the neighbor shows up and is like, "Oh, what's going on? Why are this the army here? You were watching my son. Can I have him back?" And the two Jews have to like play along and give up their child because they recognize this neighbor is trying to save him from the Nazis, and they give away their child, acting as if it was the neighbor's non-Jew child. And I really like how that neighbor raises Dominique's, I guess, father, right? Is that who that would be?
Father or grandfather, yeah.
Father or grandfather. The grandfather was the one being interrogated by the Nazis, I think.
Yeah, so father.
The father's the little boy who gets out. And the adopted non-Jewish mother still wants to raise the child with the Jewish heritage. Yeah. You know, I think it says
Catholic
they're Catholic,
kids.
they're French Catholic.
Yeah.
But this child is allowed to have a bar mitzvah and be involved in temple life and ultimately reveal their true history. And that's why Jacqueline's father passes on the heritage that she can adopt. And Ari Shamron knows all this. Like that's wild when he approaches her and uses her real name and knows more about her than even she might know.
Yeah. No, this book is good.
It's a good book.
Great
for
choice,
having no action.
Sherry.
For having very little to no action, it's great.
Yeah, besides like the attack in Paris. And if you want to call like the suspense, like it's way more like spy suspense scenes that we've gotten so far.
That's why I say he's borrowing kind of on this British old school spy novel, but combining it with, I think, a more modern day thriller. You know, 2001 is old, but not that old. So it's kind of like
years.
It's kind of like right in
23 years,
but it's not as old as some of the Le Carré stuff. So I feel like it's this bridge. It's like this gap. But again, it's not as cheap, if you will, of a Vince Flynn or Brad Thor. And I don't say cheap in a derogatory way, but in a way that the genre that they write is, I would say, boiled down for a modern audience and in many ways oversimplified. And I think this is right in the middle of those two.
I just like how it's coming from a different perspective. You know,
Yes.
we're coming from the Israeli perspective. We're normally with American operators. So it's cool to get this different side of the story.
I love it. Could we do something a little different? Because I had one other quote.
Sure.
And it hits on so much of what we covered. The Israeli-Palestinian backdrop. It can reference modern day, right? There's lessons to be learned here. It's developing two characters, Gabriel, Allon, and Shamron, developing their relationship. And it's when they're driving in the car after Shamron makes his first approach and he has to try to convince Gabriel to get back into the game. And this conversation is so deep. Chris, can we do a little reader's theater here where we are going to do the two voices, a little back and forth? Do you think we can do that?
All right. Sounds good. Who are you going to be?
I'd like to be the old man. I really would.
All right. I'll be Gabriel.
All right, cool.
All right. I'm not doing any accents.
Okay.
What does this have to do with me?
Shamron closed his eyes and recited a verse from Scripture. And the enemy shall know I am Lord when I can lay down my vengeance upon them.
Ezekiel, said Gabriel.
I believe that if someone kills one of my people, I should kill him in return. Do you believe that, Gabriel?
I used to believe it.
Better yet, I believe that if a boy picks up a stone to throw at me, I should shoot him before it ever leaves his hand. Shamron's lighter flared in the dark, making shadows in the fissures of his face. Maybe I'm just a relic.
What's your point?
My point is that revenge is good. Revenge is healthy. Revenge is purifying.
Revenge only leads to more killing and more revenge. For every terrorist we kill, there's another boy waiting to step forward and pick up the stone or the gun. They are like sharks' teeth. Break one, and another one will rise in its place.
So we should do nothing. Is that what you mean to say, Gabriel? We should stand aside and wring our hands while these bastards kill our people?
You know that's not what I'm saying.
I believe we will be no more secure after a peace deal than before it. If you want my opinion, I believe the fire in the Palestinian heart will never be extinguished until the Jews are driven into the sea. And I'll tell you one other thing, Gabriel. I would much rather do battle with a sworn enemy than an enemy who finds expediency in posing as a friend. It's like my old Jewish man with a hint of English in there.
Yeah, it was coming out a little bit of Kenneth Branagh there. A little
I was like, I'm going to grow into this. I'm going to see if it works. And by the end, I was feeling it.
You're feeling it. Feeling it. There we go.
But dude, Rise and Kill First. That's the book, literally the textbook or the history book covering the rise of the Mossad and the Israeli intelligence services.
Mm-hmm.
It's from the Talmud. They had to rise and kill first. If the boy is going to throw the stone at you, and the stone is a symbol of genocidal tendencies against your people, you have to shoot them first. You know, in some sense, Ari Shamron is trying to say that's the only moral equivalency. You know, any bit of violence perpetrated against us, if left unchecked, will grow and will fester and will basically take over. You know, like a virus, it will take over and will be extinguished. And he says we have to kill the virus before it gets out. And to him, that's dangerous. And, you know, like I can see both sides. Gabriel's pushing back just enough, even though they're on the same team. He pushes back, trying to say, like, is revenge good? Like, do you have to fight an Ari Shomron and try to show them it doesn't have to be eye for an eye? Yet Ari Shomron knows if it's not eye for an eye, our people die. Our country is gone. The Holocaust 2.0 can come back. It has to be eye for an eye. Like, that's the whole idea of this rise and kill first. That's a deep conversation there, which I think needs to be revisited today.
Yeah. It's I don't know. But at the same time, Silva like does put in all of these perspectives from the Palestinian view.
Exactly.
In
Yusuf.
You know, from Yusuf, I went and read into some of that stuff. Like you're the next couple chapters, we're going to find out a little bit more about. I read a little bit further than you did, but you know, it caused me to then go and read about these things and just the atrocities that went on. You know, and you know, I never knew about this stuff. You know, and it's just a clusterfuck. You know,
you almost get the sense Jacqueline is empathizing with Yusuf, and she should be, and we should as the audience as well. The atrocities were completed. We're also responsible for on the other side as well. So when he's explaining his childhood, being forced into the refugee camps, the bombings, the killings, the spitting on Palestinians, all that is equally as true. And so Ari Shamron, this hardliner, has to be pushed back against. And Gabriel can only do so much of that pushing because he's on the same side. But we need a Yusuf, and Jacqueline is kind of buying it and identifying with it. I don't know what she's going to do with that. I don't know if she's just going to brush it off and say, I was just undercover trying to make it look like I agreed with what Yusuf was saying. But his facts are facts. And that can't be denied. The atrocities committed by the Israeli state against Palestinians then and now can't be ignored either, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on.
Yep.
He's confronting it. And I like Daniel Silva confronting that.
Yeah, but it's men like Shamron on both sides that continue this war.
For sure. Look at what Kamal and Tariq are doing.
Yeah.
They're not clean either. Shamron's not clean. They're not clean.
No.
And Gabriel is like the vessel who actually has to have the demons haunting him over it.
Right.
Remember when Jacqueline is like, I feel like the fool because it was one of my first missions. I was young. When you killed those dudes in like 30 seconds or whatever, these
13.
Three dudes, 13 seconds. Yeah. And you took out Tariqi's brother and you basically dismantled this network. I wanted to go back to the office and I was giddy. We just won. I wanted to high five people over it. And I didn't know you went home that night and you were dealing with it. You didn't know what to do. You had a family to go see. And it was like, you just killed these people. He's like, you don't know what it's like to shoot someone close range or literally put the gun up against their temple and shoot them. And he has all these demons. And it's just like, who's right? Nobody's right.
He's a interesting character because I feel like we haven't quite delved into someone who has this like demon in a bottle like problem yet. I feel like all of our American writers haven't quite wanted to scratch that issue.
Yeah.
And I imagine it's definitely something that takes a toll on a lot of people. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some hints at it. I think Vince Flynn, Brett Thor, they've all hinted at it. Don Bentley even a little. I think Don Bentley more is like from a soldier's point of view.
Probably the most.
The PTSD, right? Or even Andrews and Wilson, some of their characters, they've all seen some things, but we go right back to that rah-rah Navy SEALs, rah-rah, which is good, and makes for good stories. But we kind of slip right back into that whole patriotic jingoistic. We love these characters. They kill all these guys. And never grapple with like
the consequences,
or even what it does to the killer.
Right. The psychology of the killer. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's interesting.
I hope we get more of that here. I really do.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to cover the second half of this book.
Yeah.
If it's anything like what the next couple chapters are going to be after where we stopped, you guys are in for a treat, man.
Yeah. The place where we stopped, he had just bugged that phone. He's getting out of the apartment. I'm like, oh shit. Does Yusuf know, these guys are spies? I don't know.
And we've been told by our patrons that there's a special twist at the end. So we know, they didn't say what it was, but we know something's coming.
And we're not recording part 2 until we have our book club discussion with the patrons. So in a week or two from now, Chris, you and I will get to hear a whole lot of perspectives, bring them back to the pod. And we not only have to grapple with the actual book, but we'll also have a bunch of different people's interpretations of the book. And I think that will make our conversation very rich as we finish this book up in part 2.
Yeah, it's perfect. Perfect how the timing worked out.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So like Mike just said, next time you hear us, we'll be covering part 2 of The Kill Artist. Until then, we need to thank our patrons, including, warning, our new Deputy Director, Sherry F., our Special Operators, Jason C., our Special Agents, Ben, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Don, Peggy, and Mark. Oh, I think Chris said she upped her thing, so I'm going to add Chris in there too.
Yes, indeed.
Please subscribe, rate, and review to all 3 seasons of No Limits. We are back on Spotify with our clips from Riverside. Go check that out at Thriller Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, just let Allon be Allon.